I came home early with a migraine and found my sister in the bathtub with my fiancé, whispering about how they were going to erase me from my own future. How do you recover from a moment like that? How do you keep breathing when the two people you trusted most are calmly planning your disappearance? My name is Vanessa Coleman. I'm 35 years old, a senior financial analyst at one of Houston's most respected consulting firms. Numbers have always made sense to me: risks, patterns, probabilities. I built my life on careful decisions, long hours, and the belief that if you were responsible enough, loyal enough, patient enough, happiness would eventually find you. For a while, I truly believed it had. 3 months before my wedding, I thought I was standing at the beginning of the safest chapter of my life. I had the career I worked for, money and savings, a man who said he loved me, and a home that finally felt warm when I walked through the door. I was wrong about almost everything, but I didn't know that yet. All I knew that afternoon was that my head was splitting open. The migraine had started as a faint pulse behind my eyes around noon, then grew teeth. By 3 o'clock, the lights in the office felt violent. My boss took one look at me and told me to go home, get some rest, come back tomorrow. I remember feeling grateful. Mark would probably still be at work. Megan might be out job hunting. The house would be quiet and dark, exactly what I needed. I didn't text. I didn't call ahead. If I had, they would have had time. When I pulled into the driveway, the first crack in reality appeared. Mark's truck was there. So was Megan's car. I told myself not to be dramatic. Maybe he came home early too. Maybe she had an interview nearby. Maybe. Hope is very creative when it's trying to protect your heart. I grabbed my bag, walked to the door, and stepped inside. Silence. Not normal silence. Not peaceful. This one felt arranged, like a stage after actors rush into hiding. I slipped off my shoes and set my keys down gently, already picturing the relief of my pillow, the curtains drawn tight, the pain dissolving into sleep. Then I saw it. On the hallway floor, illuminated by the afternoon light, lay a pair of lace underwear. White, delicate, unmistakably intimate. Not mine. It's strange how the body reacts before the mind does. My heart stalled, like it had missed a stare in the dark. Heat rushed to my face, then vanished just as quickly, replaced by a cold so complete it felt surgical. For a second, I stood there bargaining with reality. Maybe Megan dropped them while doing laundry. Maybe I was misremembering. Maybe. But no, I knew my own things. And these weren't them. The migraine disappeared. Adrenaline erased it like it had never existed. I didn't call out. I didn't want them to know I was home. Instead, I started toward the stairs. Every step felt heavier than the last. The house I loved suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I was trespassing in someone else's life. My hand brushed the banister Mark had once promised to refinish, laughing about how we would grow old here together. Grow old? The phrase almost made me laugh now. Halfway up, I heard it. Water. Soft movement. And then voices. Low, intimate, relaxed. Coming from the bathroom. The door was closed, but steam curled from the bottom, drifting into the hallway like a signal fire. My pulse roared in my ears. I told myself I could still be wrong. There were 1,000 explanations kinder than the truth. I walked closer, and then I heard Mark. Clear, calm, the voice he used when discussing practical things, budgets, timelines, plans. Once the refinancing closes, we push her out. My world tilted. Megan answered, her voice light, almost playful. And my share? You promised me 30. Of course, Mark said. She gave the money in cash. Nothing ties her to the house legally. She won't be able to prove anything. They both laughed. I stood there, hand hovering near the doorknob, and in that moment I understood something with terrifying clarity. They weren't just sleeping together. They were building a future funded by my trust, $40,000. My savings, my security. The years I spent telling myself that being careful would protect me. I waited for hysteria, for rage, for the version of myself that movies promise the woman who kicks the door open and demands answers. But she never came. Instead, something colder arrived. Quieter, more dangerous. I stepped back, slowly, carefully. My legs moved without asking permission from my heart. I walked down the stairs the same way I had climbed them, like a ghost haunting her own life. In the kitchen, my phone lay on the table. They were still upstairs, still talking, still certain I was clueless, predictable, harmless. They thought I would cry. They thought I would collapse. They thought I would make it easy. I picked up my phone and stared at the dark screen until my reflection looked like a stranger. "Okay," I whispered. If they wanted a fool, they were about to be disappointed. Because what they didn't know, what they had never bothered to notice about the quiet, responsible older sister who always forgave everything, was that I knew how to build a case. And upstairs, in that bathtub, they were about to hand me everything I needed. If you had asked me a year ago whether I trusted my fiancé, I would have laughed at how unnecessary the question sounded. Trust wasn't something I rationed carefully in love. Numbers, yes. Contracts, always. But love? Love. I gave in full measures, because I believed that was the only way it worked. Mark knew that about me. He knew I had spent my whole life being the dependable one, the daughter who handled things, the woman who didn't create drama, the person everyone assumed would be fine, even when she wasn't. And when he looked at me, when he touched my waist in the kitchen or kissed my temple before work, he made me feel chosen in a way I had secretly been hungry for since childhood. I grew up in a house where praise passed over me like weather. My younger sister Megan was sunlight, effortless, magnetic, impossible not to notice. Teachers adored her, strangers complimented her. My parents worried about her, protected her, forgave her before she even made mistakes. I was the stable one, the self-sufficient one, the one who would understand. When I graduated at the top of my class, my mother spent dinner asking Megan about her social life. When I received my promotion last year, my father texted 3 days later with a thumbs up emoji and nothing else. It wasn't cruelty. It was habit. I learned to survive on quiet pride instead of applause. So when Mark loved me loudly, when he told people I was brilliant, capable, the best thing that had ever happened to him, it filled a space inside me I had stopped admitting existed. He didn't just love me. He saw me. Or at least, I thought he did. 8 months before the wedding, Mark began talking about renovations. We would sit at the kitchen table with coffee, sketching ideas on scrap paper, new cabinets, updated bathrooms, a place that would reflect the life we were about to build together. It should feel like ours, he said. I loved the way that sounded. Ours? The refinancing would handle most of it, but there was a delay with the bank. Contractors needed deposits. Materials needed to be ordered. He needed $40,000 up front. I had it. I had built those savings slowly, patiently, through years of saying no to vacations, no to luxuries, no to impulse. That money represented safety to me, independence, proof that I would always land on my feet. Mark held my hands across the table. "I'll add your name to the deed as soon as the refinancing closes," he promised. "It's just easier this way for now. Once we're married, everything is shared anyway." There was no hesitation in his voice, no flicker of uncertainty. If there had been, I might have caught it. Instead, I saw a future husband asking for help. I transferred the money the following week. Out of professional reflex, I saved the confirmation emails. I kept copies of the wire receipt. It didn't occur to me that I was preserving evidence. To me, it was just how responsible people behaved. I never imagined responsibility would be the thing that saved me. For a while after that, life felt almost embarrassingly perfect. We talked about honeymoon destinations, argued about paint colors, laughed about whose furniture would survive the merge. I let myself relax into it. I let myself believe I had finally reached the part of my life where things stayed good. And then Megan called. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Her boyfriend had left. There had been shouting, accusations, doors slamming. On top of that, she'd lost her job. Everything had collapsed at once. "Can I stay with you for a little while?" she asked. "Just until I figure things out." Before I could answer, Mark took the phone from my hand. "Of course you can," he said warmly. Family takes care of each other. Family. It sounded noble, generous. I agreed. Because what kind of sister would I be if I didn't? She arrived with 2 suitcases and red eyes, falling into my arms in the doorway. I remember thinking she felt lighter than I expected. Fragile. Almost. Mark carried her bags upstairs, moving quickly, efficiently, like he had been waiting for a reason to help. I told myself it was kindness. I told myself I was lucky to be marrying a man with such a big heart. But houses have atmospheres, and ours shifted the moment Megan unpacked. It was subtle at first, a change in rhythm. Mark started coming home earlier. Megan started dressing better, even when she claimed she had nowhere to go. They cooked together in the evenings, laughing over small things that somehow excluded me without ever directly pushing me out. And then there were the conversations. They would be talking easily, voices low, familiar, and the second I entered the room, silence would fall like a curtain. "What are you two whispering about?" I asked once, trying to sound playful. Megan flashed that bright practice smile. "Wedding surprises. Don't ruin it." Mark kissed my cheek. "You'll love it." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Because the alternative meant admitting something ugly about the 2 people I loved most. Weeks passed like that. Enough time for doubt to grow, but not enough for certainty. Just that uneasy feeling of walking across a frozen lake and hearing faint cracks under your feet. I began to notice glances I couldn't decode, private jokes I wasn't part of, the way Mark's hand lingered at the small of her back when he passed behind her in the kitchen. Every time I saw it, I scolded myself. Don't be paranoid. Don't be insecure. Don't become the bitter older sister everyone secretly expects you to be. So I swallowed it. I swallowed every instinct that tried to protect me. Until the day the migraine sent me home early, until the lace underwear waited in the hallway, until the steam curled under the bathroom door, until their whispers stopped being ambiguous and became a blueprint for my erasure. And standing there, listening to them divide my future like it was already gone, I realized something with brutal clarity. They hadn't changed overnight. They had been building this right in front of me, and I had helped them do it. After you hear something that shatters your trust, life doesn't immediately explode. That would almost be easier. Instead, it stretches. It becomes slow and unbearable and filled with tiny moments where you try to convince yourself you misunderstood, misheard, misread. Because accepting the truth means admitting the ground beneath you is already gone. So I tried to be reasonable. I told myself there had to be another explanation for what I had started to see between Mark and Megan. Stress did strange things to people. Weddings were pressure cookers. Living together in tight spaces blurred boundaries. Maybe I was projecting old childhood insecurities onto ordinary situations. Maybe. I clung to that word like it was life support. But doubt is stubborn once it finds a home. I began noticing how often they were together when I wasn't. Megan suddenly needed rides to places she could have easily driven herself. Mark volunteered every time. If I worked late, they ordered dinner without me, always with the same explanation. "We didn't want you to worry." Sometimes I would come home and find them already laughing about something, their energy intimate, shared, like I had walked into the middle of a scene I wasn't cast in. The moment I entered, it evaporated. Conversations would stop mid-sentence. Their bodies would subtly rearrange themselves, stepping apart but not far enough. I started to recognize the choreography of concealment. Still, I said nothing. Because I had been trained my entire life to be the rational one, to not overreact, to not accuse without proof, to not be difficult. So instead of confronting them, I observed. I memorized the way Megan leaned toward him when she talked, the way Mark's voice softened around her, the way they shared looks that lasted just a fraction too long. And every night, I went to bed telling myself I was imagining it. Our neighbor, Eleanor, saw what I couldn't allow myself to accept. She had lived next door longer than anyone else on the street. 68, widowed, with silver hair, she tied back in a low bun and a permanent place on her porch swing. She read in the afternoons and watched the world with quiet patience. One evening, as I was getting out of my car after work, she called my name. "Vanessa, sweetheart, can I ask you something?" I walked over, smiling automatically. "Of course." She hesitated, studying my face as if deciding how much truth I could survive. "Are you and Mark okay?" The question startled me. "Yes, why wouldn't we be?" She gave a small nod, but her eyes remained troubled. "I just see him leaving with Megan sometimes. During the day, they seem close." I felt the familiar defensive instinct rise immediately. "They're planning wedding surprises," I said, repeating the line I had been given so many times it almost sounded convincing. Eleanor didn't argue, but she didn't look reassured either. "I just wanted you to know," she said softly. In case you didn't. The words followed me inside and echoed through the house long after the door closed behind me. That night, I watched them more carefully at dinner. The way Megan laughed at everything he said, the way Mark refilled her wine before mine. Tiny gestures, small betrayals, each one deniable on its own. Together, they formed a picture I was afraid to look at. The breaking point came from something so ordinary it almost feels ridiculous now. A phone left unattended. Mark had gone upstairs to shower. His phone sat on the kitchen counter beside me while I rinsed plates. The screen lit up, bright in the dim kitchen, and my eyes moved toward it without permission. The message preview was from a contact saved as M. I remember the exact sensation in my body. Not panic, recognition. It read, "Can't wait until she's finally gone. Then it's just us." I stopped breathing. My brain tried to offer alternatives. A joke, a misunderstanding, someone else. But there was no world where that sentence belonged to anything innocent. Mark walked in. At that exact moment, he saw my face. He saw the phone. And in one smooth motion, he picked it up. "Work stuff," he said quickly. Too quickly. He didn't meet my eyes. I nodded, like I believed him, because I didn't know what else to do. Because if I accused him, and he denied it, I would lose the fragile balance keeping my life upright. I smiled. I even asked if he wanted more coffee. But when I turned toward the stairs, my hands began to shake so violently I had to grip the railing. In the bathroom, I locked the door and stared at my reflection. "You're being paranoid," I told myself. "You're about to ruin your own happiness." Yet beneath that voice, another one whispered, "Or you're finally seeing it." For 3 weeks after that, they became perfect. Mark brought me coffee in bed. Megan asked about wedding flowers. They moved around me with exaggerated care, as if I were something fragile that might break if handled incorrectly. It worked. I started doubting myself. Maybe the message had been old. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe Eleanor had misinterpreted what she saw. Maybe stress was poisoning my mind. I wanted so badly to be wrong, because if I was right, then the man I loved and the sister I had protected my whole life were capable of something I didn't know how to survive. And so I chose denial. Right up until the afternoon, I came home early with a migraine. Right up until I saw the lace underwear. Right up until I stood outside that bathroom door and heard them calmly negotiating the price of my removal. After that, doubt died. After that, I finally understood something Eleanor had tried to warn me about without saying it outright. When people think you trust them completely, they stop hiding carefully. And that's when they make mistakes. I just didn't know yet how expensive those mistakes were about to become. Once you hear the truth out loud, you can't unhear it, no matter how much you want to. Their voices in that bathroom replayed in my mind on a loop, calm, practical, almost bored. They weren't debating whether they should betray me. They were discussing logistics, like they were planning a grocery list. Push her out. Nothing on paper. She can't prove it. I had spent my whole life believing that if something terrible ever happened, if I was ever truly wronged, there would be people who would listen. Parents, friends, the man who claimed he loved me. I still believed in that version of the world. So I tried to use it. That night, while Mark slept beside me, breathing slow and even, I stared at the ceiling and rehearsed conversations in my head. If I explained it calmly, rationally, surely someone would understand. I wasn't screaming accusations. I had heard actual words. In the morning, I called my mother. I chose my phrases carefully. I kept my voice steady. I even softened parts of it, because I knew how easily I could be dismissed if I sounded emotional. "I overheard something yesterday," I began. Mark and Megan were talking about the house, about my money, about pushing me out after the refinancing. There was a pause on the line, and then my mother sighed. Not shocked, annoyed. "Vanessa," she said, in that tired voice I knew too well, "you've always been sensitive when it comes to your sister." Sensitive. A gentler word for unreasonable. "I'm not guessing," I insisted quietly. "I heard them." "Honey, Megan is trying so hard to help with your wedding. Maybe you're stressed. You know how you get." How I get. As if there was a history of hysteria instead of a history of me swallowing hurt so everyone else could stay comfortable. I tried again. I told her about the money, about the secrecy, about the way they stopped talking when I entered a room. My mother cut me off. "I will not have you attacking your sister because you're nervous about getting married." Attacking. I hung up feeling smaller than I had in years. But I still had my father. He had always been quieter, more practical. Maybe he would listen to facts. I called him next. He listened longer, but when I finished, he exhaled heavily into the phone like I had just handed him a burden. "Vanessa," he said, "maybe you should be grateful Mark is willing to marry into this kind of tension." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear to make sure I had heard him correctly. Into this kind of tension, as if I was the storm, not the person standing in it. By the time I hung up, something inside me had started to fracture. Not loudly. Just a thin, splintering sound where faith used to be. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. If my parents couldn't hear me, maybe Mark would reveal himself if I pushed gently. Maybe guilt would surface. Maybe he would panic and confess. Maybe there was still a path where this ended without total destruction. That evening, I approached him in the kitchen. "I've been feeling strange lately," I said carefully. "Like something's off between us. Between you and Megan." I watched his face closely. There was no guilt. There was calculation. Then concern spread across his features like makeup. "Babe," he said softly, reaching for my hands, "I think wedding stress is getting to you. You've been anxious for weeks." Anxious. I tried again. "I heard things yesterday. Conversations about money." He squeezed my fingers. Gentle, reassuring, perfect. "I worry about you," he said. "Maybe talking to someone would help. A therapist. Just to work through these feelings." And there it was. Not denial. Diagnosis. He wasn't just rejecting my reality. He was replacing it with one where I was unstable. I almost admired how smooth it was. Almost. But the real performance came from Megan. Within days, relatives were texting me, carefully worded messages. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly asked if I was okay. Invitations dried up, conversations shortened. Later, I learned why. Megan had been crying to anyone who would listen. She told them she was scared for me, that I was accusing her of horrible things, that she didn't understand why her own sister hated her so much. She used words like paranoid, like spiraling. She positioned herself as the brave, loving sibling enduring my breakdown. And people believed her because she cried beautifully, because she had always been the easy one to love. I began to feel the shift everywhere. At work, in group chats, even in my own home. The air around me carried doubt. People were looking at me differently now, not as a victim, but as a potential problem. The isolation was methodical, elegant. I would walk into rooms and feel conversations hesitate, like my presence required adjustment. And the most terrifying part, it started working. Late at night, I would lie awake and wonder if maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe trauma from childhood favoritism was distorting everything. Maybe I was inventing betrayal because I didn't trust happiness. Gaslighting doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just everyone agreeing you must be wrong. One evening, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection again, searching for signs of madness in my own eyes. "Am I losing it?" I whispered. But even as I asked, the memory of their voices in the bathtub returned clear, specific, undeniable. Nothing on paper. Push her out. Crazy people don't hallucinate bank plans. And slowly, painfully, I realized something. No one was coming to rescue me. No parent would step in. No fiancé would confess. No sister would suddenly grow a conscience. If I wanted the truth to matter, I would have to make it undeniable. I dried my face, squared my shoulders, and felt something new settle where hope used to be. Not despair, strategy. If they were going to paint me as irrational, then I would become the calmest person in the room. And I would wait, because sooner or later, people who think they've already won get careless. And when they did, I would be ready. People who lie for a long time eventually make one fatal mistake. They relax. They begin to believe their own performance. They assume the person they're deceiving will stay confused forever, trapped in emotion, too overwhelmed to organize facts. Mark believed that about me. Megan did too. They thought I was wounded. They never imagined I was watching. The opportunity came disguised as something ordinary, almost laughably harmless. "Hey," Megan said one evening, leaning against the doorway of my home office. "Can I borrow your laptop for a bit? I need to print my resume. I found a job I want to apply for." Her voice was soft, hopeful, vulnerable, the little sister asking for help, the role she had perfected since childhood. For half a second, I studied her face, wondering how many layers of intention existed behind it. But if I hesitated, she would notice. If I refused, she would tell everyone I was cruel. So I smiled. "Of course." She thanked me, carried the laptop to the dining table, and worked for nearly an hour. I stayed upstairs, pretending to answer emails. But really, I was listening to every footstep, every movement, like someone waiting for a safe to click open. When she finished, she returned it with a quick hug from behind, light and affectionate. "You're the best," she said. I almost laughed at the irony. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened the computer to check my own messages. Her inbox was still logged in. I froze. It felt like standing at the edge of a moral cliff. I knew I wasn't supposed to look. I knew privacy had rules. But what about the rules they had broken? What about the plans they were making using my money, my life? They had already stepped outside fairness. Why was I still obeying it? My hand moved before my conscience could argue further. I clicked. The first thing I saw was panic in digital form. Subject lines from collection agencies. Final notices. Payment required immediately. Threats of escalation. Her balances stacked one after another, brutal in their clarity. $30,000. Credit cards, personal loans, overdue accounts. Megan wasn't unlucky. She was drowning. Suddenly, her arrival at my doorstep made terrifying sense. The tears, the breakup, the urgency. It wasn't collapse. It was strategy. Then I found the thread with Mark. And my world rearranged itself. The dates went back 6 months. 6. Not 6 weeks, like the story she had fed us. Not a sudden comfort in tragedy. This had been forming long before she ever dragged those suitcases into my hallway. Before the fake heartbreak, before the job loss, before she needed temporary help. There it was in black and white. Planning, coordination, anticipation. One message from Megan felt like a physical blow. She trusts you completely. That's what makes this work. I sat back in my chair, and something inside me went very still. Trust, not love. Not family. Trust was the tool. I kept scrolling. They discussed timing. How I was careful with money, but emotionally soft. How marriage would make everything easier. How once refinancing happened, my leverage disappeared. I wasn't a partner in their future. I was funding it. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I did what I always do when faced with catastrophe. I documented screenshot after screenshot, dates, names, messages, proof that this wasn't confusion or jealousy or imagination. This was conspiracy. When I finally logged out and closed the laptop, my hands were steady in a way they hadn't been in weeks. The doubt was gone. The loneliness remained, but now it had direction. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Instead, I went to see a lawyer. Her office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, a place where stories turned into arguments and arguments turned into consequences. I laid everything in front of her, my bank transfer receipts, Mark's earlier promises, the screenshots that revealed intent. She listened without interrupting, which in itself felt like mercy. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me for a long moment. "You're not crazy," she said simply. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed to hear that until my throat tightened. Then she did something I hadn't thought to do. She searched public court records for Mark's name, and there it was, 5 years ago. A woman named Rachel Torres had accused him of something hauntingly familiar: financial promises, shared future, contributions that vanished. The case had been dismissed, likely settled quietly, but the pattern remained. My lawyer tapped the page. "He's done this before," she said. I felt cold, but not surprised. Predators rarely innovate. They repeat what works. She turned back to my screenshots. "These help," she continued. "But if they argue you accessed her email without permission, it could get messy. What we really need is for him to confirm his promises to you directly, in writing." I understood immediately. A trap, but legal. "Can you get him to do that?" she asked. I thought of Mark on the couch, confident, relaxed, believing he was managing a fragile, emotional woman. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Yes," I said. I knew exactly how to make him underestimate me one more time. And this time, it would cost him everything. The strange thing about deciding to fight back is how ordinary life continues to look from the outside. The sun still rises. Coffee still brews. People still ask what you want for dinner. Meanwhile, inside you, an entire war map is unfolding. After meeting the lawyer, after seeing Rachel Torres's name printed in black and white like a ghost from Mark's past, something inside me settled into focus. The confusion was gone. The grief could wait. What mattered now was structure, evidence, sequence, pressure. If I moved too early, they would deny everything. If I moved too late, they would lock me out of my own future. So I went home and became the woman they believed I was. Trusting, gentle, oblivious. It felt like acting, except the stage was my own life. I laughed at dinner. I asked Megan about job applications. I sat beside Mark on the couch and leaned into his shoulder while he scrolled through his phone, probably texting her while I pretended not to notice. Every smile tasted metallic, but there was power in it too. Because they relaxed. They thought the storm had passed. They thought the accusations to my parents, the whispers about my anxiety, had worked. In their version of the story, I was shrinking back into the role they preferred: manageable, uncertain, easy to dismiss. What they didn't understand was that calm can be camouflage. One evening, Mark was watching television, half interested in some crime drama, the irony, almost funny. Megan had gone upstairs early. The house was quiet, comfortable. I stood in the kitchen, staring at my phone, my lawyer's instructions repeating in my mind. We need him to confirm his promise in writing. Simple, direct, casual. I typed, "Hey, do you know when the refinancing will finally close? I want to make sure I'm ready for when you add my name to the deed like you promised." Then I pressed send. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he would hear it from the living room. A few seconds later, I saw him glance down at his phone. He typed with one hand, barely looking away from the screen. The reply arrived. "Still a few weeks away. Don't stress about the deed stuff right now. Let's focus on the wedding." Avoidance. Expected. I let a few minutes pass, enough to seem natural. Enough to make him believe I was simply seeking reassurance. Then I sent another, "I know. I just want to confirm. You are adding me after the renovation, right?" This time, he didn't even look up. He smiled at something on TV, fingers moving automatically. "Yes," I said I would. "We'll figure it out once everything settles down." There it was. Promise acknowledged. Delay documented. In his words, I felt the strangest mix of triumph and nausea. How many women had sat where I was sitting, loving a man who was calmly writing the sentence that would later condemn him? I screenshotted the messages, backed them up, emailed them to my lawyer, then deleted the evidence from my camera roll. I returned to the couch and curled into Mark's side. He kissed my hair. "I love you," he murmured. I wondered how easily those words came to someone who treated love like leverage. The next step was Eleanor. I had avoided her since our last conversation because part of me had still wanted plausible deniability, but now denial was useless. What I needed was strength. I walked across the street the following afternoon, rehearsing how to ask for help without sounding hysterical. I didn't need to. The moment I sat down on her porch, she took one look at my face and understood everything. "You heard something, didn't you?" she asked gently. I nodded. She closed her book. "I've been watching," she said. "I see them leave together when you're at work. I see the way he touches her back, how close they stand when they think no one's looking." Her voice trembled slightly, and I realized she wasn't just telling my story. She was remembering hers. 20 years ago, she continued, my husband left me for my sister. No one believed me. They said I was dramatic, imagining things. I had nothing solid, just my word against theirs. She reached across and squeezed my hand. "I won't let that happen to you." I swallowed hard. "Would you be willing to say that, if it came to it?" "In court?" she asked. "If necessary." Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. I left her porch lighter, steadier. Not because she had given me proof, but because she had given me validation. Someone had seen. Someone would stand beside me. For weeks, they had worked to isolate me, to make me doubt my own reality. Now the circle was widening again, not with noise, with witnesses. That night, I sat in my car for a long time before going inside, letting the plan assemble itself. Mark had given me written acknowledgement. Eleanor would testify to behavior. The lawyer had a documented pattern from Rachel. All the pieces were almost ready. I just needed the right moment. And then my parents called. They wanted a family meeting that weekend. They said it was time to clear the air before the wedding. I thanked them, my voice calm, agreeable. But after I hung up, I smiled for the first time in weeks, because they thought they were organizing an intervention. They thought they were going to sit me down and correct my attitude, remind me to be kind, to be reasonable, to stop making trouble. They had no idea what I was bringing with me. I looked around the house that was supposed to become my prison, listening to Mark laugh at something on television, Megan moving upstairs like she owned the place. They believed I was walking into that meeting alone. They believed they had already won. And for the first time since the migraine, since the lace underwear, since the steam under the door, I finally felt ready. By the time Saturday arrived, I felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, not happy, prepared. I dressed carefully, choosing something simple and neutral, the way I would for an important meeting at work. No drama. No visual signal that I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of my family. In my bag sat a folder. Inside it were timelines, bank transfers, text messages, court filings, screenshots. Paper had weight. Paper didn't cry or stutter or get called jealous. Paper endured. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, Mark and Megan were already there. Of course they were. They walked in together, sat together on the couch, bodies angled toward each other in unconscious alliance. Megan's eyes were pink, as if she had been warming them up for the performance. Mark's hand rested on her shoulder, protective, steady, rehearsed. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have been fooled. My mother rushed toward me the moment I stepped inside. "Vanessa," she began, voice tight with forced patience, "we need to talk about what's been happening." My father stood near the fireplace, arms crossed, already tired of a problem he believed I had created. I sat down across from them and folded my hands in my lap. "Okay," I said. Megan sniffed softly. Mark squeezed her shoulder. The show began. "We are very worried about you," my mother continued. "Megan says you've been accusing her of terrible things, of trying to steal your fiancé, of plotting against you." My father shook his head. "This jealousy, Vanessa. We thought you were past this." Jealousy. There it was again. The family word for any pain I expressed. Megan's voice trembled on cue. "I don't understand why she hates me," she whispered. "I've only tried to help." I let them finish. I let every accusation land. I let them build the version of me they were comfortable with, the unstable, bitter older sister who couldn't stand to see happiness near her. Then, when the room finally fell quiet, I opened my bag. Before we go further, I said evenly, I brought some things. I placed the folder on the coffee table. The sound of it landing seemed louder than it should have been. Mark shifted beside Megan, just slightly. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face for the first time. Good. I opened the folder and slid the first pages forward. These are bank records, I explained. 8 months ago, I transferred $40,000 to Mark for the house renovation. No one spoke. I placed the next set down. These are texts from last week. I asked him to confirm that he would add my name to the deed after refinancing. My mother leaned closer. My father uncrossed his arms. Mark tried to smile. Vanessa, we talked about this. I kept going. He wrote, Yes, I said I would. Silence thickened. I laid out the court filing next. This is from 5 years ago. A woman named Rachel Torres accused Mark of making financial promises, taking contributions, and then removing her. Megan's head snapped toward him. I watched fear begin its slow crawl across both their faces. Finally, I placed the screenshots on top. These, I said, my voice still perfectly calm, are messages between Mark and Megan. They begin 6 months ago, before her breakup, before she moved in. My mother made a small sound, like air leaving her lungs. Mark's composure cracked. You went through her email, he demanded. Yes, I said. And I found planning. I found debt. I found coordination. Megan's breathing turned sharp and uneven. Then instinct took over. Not love. Survival. He approached me. She burst out. He knew I owed money. He said he could fix it if I helped him. Mark turned on her instantly. Are you insane right now? You came after me? You researched my house? Their voices rose, tripping over each other, desperate to throw blame faster than it could land. My father's voice cut through them like a blade. How long? Megan hesitated. Mark didn't. 6 months, he snapped. She planned this for 6 months. There it was. Not a confession meant for justice. A confession born from panic. But truth doesn't care why it's spoken. It just needs air. The room collapsed into noise. My mother started crying. Megan shouted. Mark tried to reassemble control, but it was gone now, bleeding out across the coffee table in ink and timestamps. I gathered my papers slowly, giving them time to absorb what they had done. Then I stood. Here's what happens next, I said. My voice didn't shake. Mark, you have 30 days to sign a repayment agreement for my $40,000 plus interest. If you refuse, my lawyer will proceed with civil action, and the bank reviewing your refinancing will receive a full report, including Rachel Torres. I turned to Megan. And you may want to consider how participating in this affects your already delicate financial situation. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Good. They had mistaken my silence for weakness for years. Now they were finally meeting the woman who had been taking notes. Behind me, my mother called my name, broken, confused. My father looked as if the past had rearranged itself in front of him, and he didn't know where to stand anymore. Mark shouted, "This isn't over." I paused at the door. Without turning around, I answered, "It already is." Then I walked outside into the evening air. For the first time since this began, my hands were steady, because the truth was no longer trapped inside my head. It was in theirs, and it was going to follow them home. I used to think justice would feel dramatic, explosive, loud, cinematic. I thought there would be shouting in hallways, doors slamming, people collapsing under the weight of what they had done. But real consequences are quieter than that. They arrive like winter. Slow, undeniable, impossible to argue with once they settle in. In the days after the meeting, I expected chaos. Instead, what I got was distance. Mark stopped calling. Megan stopped pretending. My parents moved through conversations with the stunned fragility of people realizing they had misjudged something fundamental. And for the first time, no one asked me to apologize for how I felt. Mark's unraveling began in a place I never had to touch. The bank. When institutions start looking closely, men like Mark rarely survive it. During the refinancing review, inconsistencies surfaced: income numbers that didn't match official records, claims that bent too far away from reality to be mistakes. I didn't report him. I didn't have to. He had built his own trap long before I entered the picture. Within weeks, his employer placed him on suspension pending investigation. In his line of work, trust is currency, and suspicion alone can bankrupt you. Colleagues who once admired him began stepping away, careful not to be standing too close to a falling structure. I heard updates through mutual acquaintances, each one sounding less like gossip and more like inevitability. Then Rachel Torres made her move. When news of scrutiny around Mark resurfaced, someone contacted her old attorney. She had been waiting years for someone else to confirm she hadn't imagined what happened to her. This time, she wasn't alone. She gave statements. She provided context. She described the same charm, the same promises, the same vanishing accountability. Patterns matter, especially when they repeat. Megan's collapse looked different. There were no investigations, no official letters. Her consequences arrived in the language she understood best: abandonment. After the meeting, my parents didn't throw her out in fury. They did something far worse for someone like Megan. They withdrew protection. My mother told her gently that she needed space, that she had to figure out who she was without someone else cleaning up the aftermath. For a woman who had been cushioned her entire life, that sentence landed like exile. She tried staying with Mark. He refused. According to what I later heard, he blamed her for panicking, for confessing too much, for ruining the careful balance he believed he could still maintain. Partners in deception rarely make good partners in crisis. The alliance that once looked so intimate dissolved almost immediately. Without shared advantage, they had nothing left to offer each other. And when desperation grows, people start trading information. By the second week, they were quietly damaging one another to mutual friends. Mark called Megan manipulative, reckless, unstable. Megan described him as predatory, experienced, frighteningly practiced. Every word they threw was another brick falling from the house they tried to build with my money. Meanwhile, my phone filled with Megan's voice. At first, she was furious. "You destroyed everything," she shouted in one message. "You humiliated me." Then came the bargaining. Mark pushed me into it. "You know how persuasive he is." Then came tears. "Please, you're my sister. I made a mistake." I listened to each voicemail exactly once. Then I saved them. And I never called back. People like to imagine forgiveness as a door you reopen. But sometimes, forgiveness is simply choosing not to step back inside the fire. 30 days after the meeting, Mark signed the repayment agreement. My lawyer handled every word of it: structured payments, interest, deadlines, legal accountability. He didn't do it because he was sorry. He did it because he was cornered. I accepted that. I wasn't seeking remorse anymore. I was securing recovery. The house that had once represented my future became irrelevant. I no longer wanted a place where betrayal had learned my routines. I found a small apartment across the city. 1 bedroom, narrow kitchen, windows that overlooked a parking lot instead of a garden. And yet, when I turned the key for the first time, relief flooded me so completely I had to sit down on the floor. No one else had access. No secrets lived in the walls. Every object inside belonged to me because I had chosen it. Eleanor came by that weekend carrying a plant in a ceramic pot, setting it on the windowsill like a blessing. "For your new beginning," she said. I hugged her longer than I expected to. At work, something unexpected happened too. My boss called me in and told me the director position I had earned months ago was still available, but she would understand if I wanted more time. More time to grieve. More time to fall apart. I surprised both of us. "I'm ready," I said, because surviving betrayal had clarified something powerful. I was done shrinking. The announcement went out Monday morning. Director. The word looked steady beside my name. That night, I sat in my quiet apartment surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, Eleanor's plant catching the last of the light, and I realized something extraordinary. They had tried to evict me from my own life. Instead, they had freed me into it. I thought back to the woman standing outside the bathroom door weeks earlier. Heartbreaking, future dissolving. She thought she was losing everything. She had no idea she was about to find herself. We are now ready for the final emotional closure. Stories like this stay with us because they touch a fear many people quietly carry. What if the ones I trust the most are the ones capable of hurting me the deepest? Vanessa didn't win because she was louder, crueler, or more ruthless. She won because she chose clarity over denial. She stopped begging to be believed and started gathering truth. And in doing that, she did something even more powerful than exposing betrayal. She reclaimed her own worth. What makes this journey unforgettable isn't just the downfall of those who tried to deceive her. It's the transformation of a woman who finally understood that love should never require blindness and family should never demand self-erasure. Watching her move from shock to doubt to strategy to freedom reminds us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it documents, waits, and then walks away without looking back. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose yourself when no one else would, I invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Hanjiwiya Iyagi for more stories about resilience, justice, and the quiet courage it takes to begin again. And if you feel comfortable, share your thoughts below. Your voice might be the reassurance someone else needs tonight.